Cool. Welcome, everybody. We are having this webinar today to talk about preparing for all of the changes coming to GSA and the multiple award schedules. We have with us a very special guest, Katie Grogan, who is one of the foremost experts in GSA contracting vehicles. And we put this webinar together to kind of give you guys an idea about where contracting is heading in the future and what you can do to prepare, because there are a lot of big changes on the horizon. And I think it's important that we, as an industry, start now to look to see what are the practical steps we can do today to make a difference in our business, and certainly our growth projections. So with that, a little bit about OST, and then I'll hand it over to Katie to carry us through. So we are OST Global Solutions is a full lifecycle business development consulting firm. We've won over $27 billion in funded work for our clients since 2005. That does not include ceiling values, that is dollars to companies. So we help identify opportunities, we do market research, we manage our clients' pipelines, we do qualifications, we help with capture, and then of course we write winning proposals. We have the only in the nation registered business development apprenticeship program. So if you are looking to train your internal staff on BD, this is the most cost-effective way to do it. We put all of our internal consultants through this course, and graduates receive a certificate from the Federal Department of Labor. And also, if you have any veterans on your team or you are a veteran yourself, we accept all GI Bill chapters. So post 9/11 GI Bill and eligible dependents will qualify for the housing stipend. We also accept VR&E, which used to be called Vogue Rehab. So we do a lot of work with SBIR and STTRs for Maryland and Alabama through the SBA's FAST grant. So that's OST. I appreciate you guys coming. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Katie. She's been a longtime partner of ours. Katie Grogan is the founder and CEO of K&G Enterprises, a firm that specializes in GSA mass proposals and post-award contract management for the past 11 years. She's helped hundreds of companies get on the mass vehicle and supported Oasis Plus, 8A Stars, Align, HCATs. And she is an expert in GSA mass solicitation strategy and sin alignment, pricing analysis and contract modifications, post-award compliance. And she is a frequent advisor to clients on navigating major policy shifts. Words are hard today, apologize. Mass consolidation, executive orders on procurement reform, and she is an advocate for small businesses to access the federal markets and equitable procurement reform. So with that, give a warm welcome to Katie, and we will get into it.
Awesome. So just a brief overview of what we're going to go through today. Most of the knowledge that I have and I'm bringing to this group is really around the multiple award schedule. What I know from talking to, my partners inside of GSA and from the, hundreds of clients that we have and represent and what they're thinking. And in the past couple of weeks, I've spent the majority of the time on the phone talking to our clients and advising them and helping them understand some of the executive orders and the potential implications to all of you as contractors as this moves forward. So I'm going to go through what I know, what I think, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So it looks like I can see the chat. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in as I'm going through, and I will try to distinguish what I know as fact and where I think the industry is going and the contract as a whole. But feel free to put any input or insight or questions as I'm going through this. So you can go on to the first section. Okay, so if you have a multiple award schedule already awarded, you should be receiving the notices from GSA Interact, and you can see when the new acting administrator or the team at GSA Mass is sending information about what is happening. It can be a little bit confusing because the information is certainly coming from multiple directions. But I think the biggest news that's happened about a month ago was the executive order explaining that common goods and services will be transferred to GSA to do a centralized acquisition, and GSA will be, the central purchasing authority for the federal government. We've already seen some of that happening. If you're watching the news, Google won, a significant contract to handle Google Workspace on behalf of the federal government. And why it's so unique to me, and it's interesting, I think, and maybe foreshadowing for where the industry is going. When GSA announced the award to Google, they are treating the federal government as one customer versus each individual agency handling their own purchasing. So if that's a trend that's going to continue, I think that it likely will, in an effort to save money. You can, take the combination of this executive order and some of what's happening internally at GSA, I would say, as a little bit of foreshadowing of potentially what the future looks like, especially for common commercial goods. So to date, OPM, Department of Education, SBA, and HUD have started transitioning contracting over. So if you have orders with those agencies, you've probably already begun this process. And someone from GSA will reach out to you and ask you to get registered, most likely in this assist portal where they're going to be managing these orders. And there's 11 more agencies that will follow. Each agency is working on a plan to see what they can centralize into GSA. And it's a major change, but it seems that, they've been moving along fairly effectively and transitioning those over and trying to, make it as easy for you as possible. So, the idea of creating a government-wide purchasing, a centralized purchasing, is definitely here. Whether the technology is ready or not to do it, it will get there, I truly believe. But if you think about, I think throughout all of this, I'm going to be explaining, instead of thinking about the individual orders that you have with each of your customers, start thinking as if you were, GSA or DOJ or anyone that's in these agencies that's trying to streamline and save money. They want to look across all of the agencies and find commonalities of products and services they're purchasing and potentially roll them, into a consolidated procurement effort and with the intention of saving money. So Google was a great first example. If you sell commercial, products or services, I believe those will be targeted first in trying to centralize this. But I do believe personally this is, the future. And, in addition, the news has stated clearly, GSA is doing an analysis of the government IT contracting vehicles. So NASA SOUP, CISP4, where can they centralize procurement vehicles? How can they roll it up to lessen the burden of the administration of managing these contracting vehicles? So that is, I think, the future. And yeah, that's where I think we will be going, but you can start to see it happening if you're tracking some of the agencies that are already switching over. So you can go ahead to the next. The other large change that I think we're all most anxious for is the FAR, the changes, whether it's FAR 2.0 or just a revision of the FAR. And, the coming months, I think we'll have a better idea of what that looks like. And I'm going to talk about some of the opportunities that, GSA has presented to the industry so that you can offer feedback and maybe how some of these regulations change. But this is definitely a huge reform in the acquisition policy. And no, we don't know exactly what it's going to say, but I think we can understand by where they're going by consolidating the FAR with the intention of, I would say, minimizing protests, making acquisition easier, and moving towards as many commercial purchases as possible, and eliminating some of these customized products and services. So that is, the future of the FAR. We don't know until we see it, but we're anxiously all watching for what is to come. And another major change, obviously based on executive orders, is the federal IT procurement as it relates to all IT products and services. If the agencies are buying a product or service that's considered non-commercial, based on the executive order last week, they have 60 days to explain why they need to buy something that's not a commercial commodity. And there's an extra level of justifying purchasing that's not considered commercial. So, as we look at the contracting vehicles that are on the market right now that haven't been awarded, that many of you I'm sure have put proposals in for, I think that's going to also trend to that realignment of moving as many GWACs into the mass portfolio or the GSA portfolio, whatever that looks like in the future. And that's also related to the executive order to start to manage federal IT procurement. I would say the administration is definitely focused on acquiring as many commercial products and services as possible and eliminating the need for these customized products and services. So they want to look to the market and see what's available and what they can integrate into the government systems without creating custom solutions. So you can go ahead. And as you know, every time there's change, there's always, some kind of probably a negative, that's going to happen. I definitely believe as this is unfolding with centralized purchasing, there is the intention to integrate technology, and the technology is really not fully there yet, but it will be at some point. So, like it or not, the AI automation tools to analyze contracts, make purchasing decisions, perhaps even, reviewing statements of work, and reviewing your proposals in the future. If it's not there now, it will be, and that's definitely what the government is working towards, is trying to move at the speed of the commercial market and integrate as many tools and technologies to help make these processes more efficient. In the meantime, I think there will be a slowdown of purchasing as they're trying to centralize all of these products and services into larger contracts that require less acquisition. And it's definitely I think a risk for small businesses, because we have to all be more agile and figure out how to work together to pursue some of these opportunities versus just assuming that the orders that you have will continue as usual. I will speak to this more, but I really think it's a time for every vendor, every industry, partner that's working with the federal government to look at what you're providing to the government. And if you feel that your competitors are selling something similar to other agencies, now might be the time to really work together and try to pursue those opportunities together if they do in fact roll into one contract. I don't think that any one order is necessarily safe. When they're using these tools and trying to streamline, they're going to find ways to roll them into larger contracts that extend the purchasing power of the federal government, just like they did with Google, because they can save money if they're buying on behalf of the federal government versus an independent agency. So the consolidation certainly, I think, in this case could affect small businesses in a new way, but small businesses are also better about working together and teaming and figuring out how you can pursue this new market with partners. And maybe the business just looks different, but I think there's certainly ways to protect it if this is the future. So, GSA is obviously working as efficiently as they can with a reduced staff to do all of this work. Everyone I've worked with in all these years at GSA truly is, they work really hard and they're doing the best they can, but be patient. Things are not going to be moving at the speed of light right now. I believe we have to give them some grace in that because it's just a huge operation overhaul change that's going to be happening as this work is rolling into GSA. So be patient, but and prepare for it. I know a lot of companies are looking at their pipeline right now and with some fear and uncertainty of what the future is bringing, but if you change it to looking at how you can work together and pursue and bring a solution to your customers before they even have to go present it, you can get ahead of the game in that perspective. So you can go ahead. Okay. So this is what we know as of today, GSA Refresh 26. The draft has been posted, and GSA initially posted multiple sins that they intended to delete, and they heard from industry that some of those sins shouldn't be deleted, and they responded to that. And I think that's the most important part about GSA and using GSA as a partner. They are listening to you all. So when you see these advance notices of GSA refreshing, whether you have a contract now or not, if you're still at the point that you're trying to decide if you should get it, you can still respond to industry notices and give feedback, because they did take that into consideration, especially if you have orders under some of these sins. So the major change that I don't think we're going to have a lot of authority over is that your GSA contract is 20 years. Each option period is 5 years. If you don't have 100,000 in sales in the first 5 years and or 125,000 in sales every 5 years thereafter, at the time of the option, your contract will be canceled. In the past, there was exceptions by saying you had proposals that were pending, or you were able to show a good faith effort of working towards an opportunity, and that has not been the case in the past few weeks. If you're up for the option, and I've had some that are have missed it by just a few thousand, GSA is not being flexible. They are definitely enforcing this. So if you don't have the sales, it's going to be an issue, and keep that in mind depending on where the period of performance of your contract lies. It does cost them money to administer these contracts. So in an effort to save money, this is an easy, it's an easy solution for them. So keep that in mind when you're coming up at the time to exercise the option, and communicate with the contracting representative that's assigned to your contract ahead of time. If you do feel you have pending proposals with a good probability of winning, communication is key. So don't wait until a week before the option. Start 6 months before communicating with them if you're close to that, to that point. But that is definitely happening. GSA is also, if you sell products, you're probably familiar with receiving a scorecard. That's, where they talk to you about your on-time delivery and, how many, did you invoice in time? Did you ship in time? They're using that data. They've actually paused it yesterday temporarily because there's an issue with it, but the intention is to use that data to understand if companies are compliant within their schedule. And I think you can expect that there's going to be more tracking of what you're doing. Are you reporting your sales in a timely fashion? Are you signing your mass mods within the time that they're allowing? And you're going to see a lot of mass mods, I believe, coming in the coming months. So even though they give you 30 days, just go and sign it as soon as possible, because any data that they can pool to try to understand contractor compliance, I believe they will. So your subcontracting reports, if you're an other than small business, just make sure you're on time. And there's been many emails over the past years about the new GSA catalog system. Historically, GSA has used, the SIP system. That's very antiquated. So they put a significant effort into creating the new FCP catalog. You will get notified about 30 days before you're required to transfer to the new catalog system. It requires you to submit a modification to baseline your contract and then transfer your price proposal templates and your awarded rates and pictures into this new system. So you definitely should watch for those emails and make sure you are, submitting those modifications as soon as possible. And again, patience, that it's not perfect. There's definitely some things we're learning, especially with the services side, but it's a 3-step process that you have to verify your profile, submit a baseline mod, and then submit the new FCP catalog system. And we're happy to help you through that. And I know David is as well if you reach out to him. So when you see that coming, make sure you do that. Look at your scorecards, understand where you are. If your score is low and it's consistently low, figure out why. The scorecards are not perfect. We'll often see that it's just something hasn't been updated in the system properly. So make sure your scorecard is truly reflective of what your delivery is. If you're in services, you're likely not seeing this. This is really primarily for products, but keep an eye on it and make the corrections if needed so that there's record if it is not correct. And within GSA Refresh 26, they deleted the SBSA SINs, the small business set aside SINs, and just transferred them so it's no longer a small business set aside. So the SINs aren't necessarily being removed, it's being changed to a new SIN. And in order for you to maintain compliance with the contract, you need to submit those modifications. So, and some SINs were deleted as part of, or will be as part of Refresh 26, and some are just simply changing, and those modifications need to be processed. And many of the contracting specialists I know are incredibly busy. So look at your SINs, follow the mass mods, figure out which ones are being deleted and if they affect your contracts, and proactively just start communicating with them to make sure that you're submitting any of the modifications that you need to. So, and if you only have an SBSA SIN or a SIN that's being deleted on your schedule, if that's your only SIN that's awarded, your entire contract will be canceled. And you want to be proactive about potentially adding another SIN before they go and delete the only SIN that you have awarded, because that will in fact cancel your contract. So most of the SINs that are being canceled are related to commercial commodities or low sales SINs at this point. But I think we can expect more of that in the future as GSA is trying to understand which products and services are considered commercial and don't need to be managed on the schedule. So keep an eye on that, provide feedback to GSA as needed, and just make sure you're keeping the contract compliant, and reach out if you need someone to look at it to understand if you are compliant or not. GSA is definitely looking at all of the SINs to see where the lowest market demand is, and again, where things can be commercially purchased that don't need to be managed by a schedule. So if you think you fall into those categories, start communicating with GSA, start submitting feedback, and really watch these notices in advance. Sign up for GSA Interact, and you'll get the time to respond and give them feedback. But anything you can do to be proactive now, go ahead and do that. And I see someone had a question about AI SINs. Yes, there in Refresh 26, there is language posted about changing some of the language of the IT space SINs. Some of that does have to do with AI. I believe there will be more changes to come, but if you look on Interact, there's a draft version of the solicitation that explains the SINs in detail and the changes that they're making. And I think that is all I have on the future of the SINs right now. So this is just a little checklist for you to use to stay in compliance. Look at the emails from just look at all of the emails, anything ending in gsa.gov, don't delete it. Once you opt into your contract is opted into the new catalog system, you get the emails daily. It's hard to ignore them, but there's a date in that email that says you'll be eligible to transfer as of X date, and it usually starts 30 days from the time you get that first email. I really feel that now is the time for all contractors to review all of the SINs that exist and understand what you can add to your contract. I think the future of government purchasing is GSA, and the multiple award schedule is a large vehicle, billions of dollars of sales running through it. You can only see the opportunities for the SINs that you have awarded. So when you look at that list of SINs, think about your past performance, and if you have past performance that matches to any additional SINs, now is the time to go in and start adding it. And it's good to just stay active with the contract, but it's also good to prepare for the future by having a variety of SINs, especially as GSA is looking at the SINs and trying to figure out what to consolidate, what to move. I would say look at your SINs, understand what your capacity is and try to grow your schedule right now if you can. And like I said, GSA is listening to you all. Give feedback if you have recommended changes in ways to make the system more efficient. I would say definitely go and do that. And I'm going to give you some ideas of some of the things that I have feedback on. GSA historically is based on the most favored customer basis of award, where you're promising to give GSA the best price. I think that's antiquated and outdated. And I'll show you what my recommendation is that I've written in to the council for review based on the most favored customer and basis of award. But communicating this to GSA is very important because they don't know, we all talk amongst ourselves, but we often don't include them in the conversation. So I do think it's important to explain what you think would be helpful. And as far as the pricing goes, I believe that's very helpful. And I'll talk a little bit about that with my recommended changes. So you can go ahead to the next one. So I posted about it. GSA has posted notices about it. Now is the first time they've really, GSA and OMB, launched this effort to collect information from the industry about changes in deregulation. They've created a very simple portal on regulations.gov that you can submit feedback about the regulations that you think are hurting you or stopping you from doing business. I've put the kind of 5 bullets here of the main things they want to know. They've been very clear about this in their messaging, and they want to know, not just say, hey, get rid of this, but why, how does it affect your contract? Give real examples of why you think it should be removed. And I'm going to go through some of the recommendations just to get you thinking about how you can impact some of these changes by giving feedback. So this is just a screenshot of what it looks like. It's very easy to use, but I definitely recommend thinking about the regulations that are in place, how they affect your business, and if it creates a problem for you to do business with the government, give them your feedback now. So I'll explain some of mine here next. So this clause, the GSA price reduction clause, is, I'd say, many companies thorn in their side about GSA, because historically GSA has been a vehicle that has just said, we are GSA, we want the best price. You show us how much you've charged to all of your other customers, and we want a discount off of that. I've negotiated hundreds of GSA contracts, and they all go that essentially the same way. A few years ago, GSA released a pilot program called transactional data reporting, and certain vendors were able to opt into it. That removed this clause, and instead of giving GSA the best price, your pricing was negotiated in theory based on what was available on the market. So they're collecting the data that you're reporting by saying, you've invoiced this labor category, X amount of hours per hour. They're, putting that data, and then they're using it in the data to decisions portal, and they're using it internally to negotiate and get market research. So there's been steps to remove this clause. I think it's outdated, but they're not fully there yet. So I personally feel this clause would free small businesses to be able to charge the government what you feel you should be able to charge them without having to guarantee to give GSA the best price, because it doesn't make sense to give GSA the best price in a variety of examples. And, especially when you need to change your pricing with GSA, it can be very time consuming. Modifications can lag for a long time depending on how busy the office is. So it doesn't help anyone. It increases your chance of having an IG audit. And anytime I can opt a company into the TDR program now, I will 100% push for that. And I believe that in the future, we will see that this mass price reduction clause goes away or changes if TDR is truly the future. I personally would love to see the mass contracting vehicle as a non-price vehicle, allowing you all to compete at the task order level and give the best price that you can. I think that will, and I really think it will create more competition by doing that. And that would be my ideal goal. And if not, the best case scenario is going to be transactional data reporting, and they're going to use that data to negotiate against all of you. But I think two things can be true. It can be an unpriced vehicle and you still file TDR reporting, but GSA doesn't have to negotiate price at the order level. And someone asked if TDR is available for companies with existing schedules. Yes, you have to have a TDR eligible SIN right now. So if you look at if you just Google TDR eligible SINs, GSA has a tool. You can type in your SINs. I'll tell you 54151S is not there, but software is. And facilities, there's some professional services SINs. So if you don't have an eligible SIN that allows you to opt into TDR, you could add a TDR eligible SIN. So you add that SIN and then you can opt into the program. And, I think, again, if feedback from industry is important, tell GSA you don't want to follow the price reduction clause. It really puts you as a business at risk, because if you ever were to have an audit, and I've been through several, they really are going to look at your accounting system and your invoices to your non-GSA customers and really want to track and understand, has GSA been overcharging? Do you owe them money? Do you owe agency money? So staying compliant, if you are within the price reduction clause, most favored customer basis of award, be smart about it. But I do believe in the future we will move towards hopefully everyone eligible to opt into TDR, and then moving towards either a standard list of labor categories or potentially even removing price as a factor to the schedule. That's more of my dream, but I think it'll make it a lot easier for you to do business with the government if you don't have to be submitting modifications every time you want to change your price. Okay, another clause, and I'm putting some of these up to get everyone's brains, thinking, I guess, in a different way about going, through these regulations. So TAA compliant and Buy America Act, GSA follows the Trade Agreement Act. And the reason is trade agreement is applicable to orders that are over $250,000, and the estimated contract value for a multiple award schedule is over $250,000. So it automatically applies to purchases on the multiple award schedule. While I think in theory the idea is great, there's certain industries that it doesn't make sense. Book publishing is a big one. Books are printed in China and India because of cost savings, and book publishers are not necessarily going to move on that just because they want to have something on the multiple award schedule. There's in the IT space, obviously there's a huge amount of electronics that are coming from other countries, and for me, one of the biggest risks about the Trade Agreement Act is the definition of what constitutes as substantially transformed. Companies get to make that decision if they feel their product is substantially transformed in the United States, then it's in compliance with the Trade Agreement Act. But there's still a lot of interpretation left in this act. So I think if you're a product-based company, this was definitely one of those clauses that you should consider offering feedback on, or how you think it could be improved. You don't have to say that all of these clauses have to be rescinded. You can offer, reassessment or changes. And this, I think, would be one worth thinking about if you deliver a product. And you can go to the next one. Okay, and then this is a standard of responsibility, financial responsibility. If you've gone through OASIS Plus or a multiple award schedule, you have to demonstrate financial responsibility. You generally show a balance sheet and profit and loss statement, and GSA makes the decision based on a ratio of information that they pull from those financial documents. I have been personally asking to release what is the formula that you're looking for so that we can understand it. The solicitation is still vague, as it was in OASIS Plus, for how financial adequacy is determined. It's, there is a financial review office, a financial analyst at GSA that handles these reviews, but what we're finding with new offers, especially in the technology space, the government is saying, we want commercial technologies, we want innovative ideas. And a lot of the companies that have invested heavily into creating these innovative ideas, their financials, while they might be heavily backed and funded, their financials are showing a negative at the end of the year. And we're having a hard time communicating to GSA that, these companies have the financial backing and investment, and they are negative because they're developing new services and technology. So as financial responsibility becomes, I would say, a higher priority in some of these vehicles, and we are seeing that across the board, the way that the government analyzes that, I think, needs to be more clear to the industry, because simply saying financially responsible is very broad in scope, and it seems to be to the discretion of the contracting office, which is fine, but it doesn't always make sense for all companies. Just because a company is showing negative doesn't mean that that's not going to turn around. There's a lot of reasons in the commercial market why companies' financials might show this way. And if you don't have a schedule, this financial responsibility is part of getting a schedule. And I will say in the past, 3 months, it's been a part of the proposals that's more heavily analyzed with less flexibility, frankly. And I think it prohibits some companies with great ideas and great technology from being able to get onto some of these vehicles. And I would personally love to see GSA change it or be transparent about what they're looking for. If it's a debt to income ratio and you need a certain amount of capital or line of credit to offset it, if we're going to have financial responsibility, we really should know exactly what it is that they're looking for, because right now there's no magic number and there's no way for me to even do a pre-award evaluation without understanding exactly how they're determining this. So obviously the contracting officers that sign off on this are putting their name to prove that the company is responsible. And I understand the hesitancy, but I also don't want to prohibit companies with great ideas to be able to do business with the government, because this is one clause that I think could prevent that. Okay, and then we're going into kind of preparing for the future. I talked a little bit about the Google order, a huge award that was made to them. We're seeing it happening there. I think, we're seeing some of that kind of with the the government credit card system and some of the opportunities that are out now, but consolidating procurement efforts. All we can use is to really understand the future of the market outside of talking to, your customers directly, I think, is looking at the trends. And, it's no secret, there's not a ton of awards coming out right now. This is a pretty big one, so it got more attention than I think it generally would. But I think it's a really unique contract award in that they're purchasing on behalf of the entire federal government, and that shows in the cost saving measures that this is what's happening. So, if you're treating the federal government as a single customer, there's benefits to them, the cost of doing business, and consolidating waste. This is how, I think the future of the industry. And, whether it happens or not, this is where I personally think it's going. And I can't say enough that partnering with companies around you to pursue opportunities, being more strategic about how you work together, look at the publicly available data to see if the work you're performing at one agency is very similar to the work another company is performing at another agency, and start communicating with them. and trying to figure out if these, contracts will be rolled into one. Commodities, that's an easy one. We haven't seen it as much with the services yet, but I believe in time that it will get there. And, talking to your customers, communicating with them, and figuring out from them where they, what they see, and as this evolution is happening, can give you a lot of insight into the future. And I know someone, I think this is relevant, talked about combining sins. This is like the $1 million question: which sins will be combined, and will it be a wasted effort? I don't know. I mean, in my mind, I think there's a lot of ways that the sins can be consolidated, and I certainly have my recommendations of how that could happen, but I don't have a magic, insight into the future of what that's going to look like. There's different reasons in the IT space why, cybersecurity is different from IT professional services, because there's different evaluation criteria. But when I look at the RFPs that come out under 541, 51S, for example, most of them always include a cyber security factor. They include a cloud factor. They include work that in scope falls under multiple sins. So I would say, if you think you want to add the sins, just go ahead and get the process started and get the ball rolling, because we don't know what the future holds. But if they did roll them up into larger pools, I think there would be still some level of subcategory against those sins. And I don't know that that's going to happen as fast as maybe we originally thought. So if you're thinking of doing it, I would say just start doing it. Start working with your contracting specialist, or OST, or someone, and say, this is what you want to do. Go ahead and get it rolling. I think what's more likely to happen first, if I had to guess, is that everyone will be eligible to opt into TDR, and I hope that's what happens first. But go ahead and if you think you're going to add sins, do it. The cybersecurity sin does still have an oral evaluation, and it takes about 30 days to get that scheduled and launched. So if you're thinking of cyber, I would go ahead and get that ball rolling, because I believe you'll see an increase of companies adding that sin or submitting new offers with that sin under it. And David, you can go to the next one. Okay, so this falls into, what do we do now? I believe the multiple award schedule is going to be the, a surviving vehicle out of all of them. And being prepared for whatever comes out in the future, I think, is the most important. We're heading towards the end of the fiscal year. Government spending is definitely at a low as far as the RFPs and things that I'm tracking. There's a lot of RFIs, there's a lot of sources sought. Responding to those is very important, but being prepared for things that hopefully come out before the end of the fiscal year, I think, is critical. So look at your awarded labor categories, look at your pricing. Do you have escalation built in? Do you have all the sins that you want and need on your contract? Do you have, if you have products, do you have pictures? Do you have the right descriptions? Just really take some time and look at your schedule from a compliance standpoint and bring it up to speed. GSA also has the CTAs that are unique, where you both will get credit towards your schedule as primes. So if you work together in a CTA relationship under the mass vehicle, you would submit the proposal with a CTA agreement that GSA has a template for, and you both get to report your sales and get credit against the schedule. It's a really good way to make sure you're hitting your minimum sales requirement if you can work out a CTA relationship. Both of the companies have to have the schedule and the SIN in order to be able to bid on it, but you can both leverage your own labor rates at the proposal level. So look at CTAs, learn about that. There's a lot of resources on GSA's websites about how to do that. And, just be ready. And then, I think we know that GSA is doing a review of, these different contracting vehicles, and, they're most likely reviewing a lot of the orders at whether it's doing it now or later, the orders that you have. So think about the contracts that you have, think about how to make them more efficient. think about GSA as an entity and what they're being tasked with. If you are in the IT space, if you do have access to emerging technologies, one thing I would say about this group is the administration in general. They are interested in integrating emerging technologies into the federal government. You just have to find the right people to talk to, and don't eliminate yourselves from that conversation. If you have an idea or a way to improve something, present it, submit the idea to GSA, set up a meeting with someone, go. I'm always happy to make introductions or resources to people that I know, but if you know ways to make things more efficient, they're going there, they're implementing the technology, they're doing it, and you can be a part of that conversation if you have an idea or a technology that already exists that they can utilize. So think of it, from that perspective, and work with each other, definitely.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Katie. This has been super helpful. I'm going to go over the next steps and resources, and then we got a bunch of questions here that I think are going to be good for folks to hear. So please sign up for our newsletter and schedule an appointment. You can scan the QR code here. We provide market analysis, BD strategy, pipeline management, opportunity qualification, other capture support. We also help build teams for people during capture. And as Katie was saying, any problems that you can solve for GSA, they very, very much want to hear from us. I think that there were some great recommendations from Katie today about that. Certainly, whatever other recommendations you guys have, please get that over to GSA, because this is going to be the future for the foreseeable. Well, this is going to be the environment we live in for the foreseeable future. So also update your mass contract and be prepared. We provide a lot of support in that. So with that, there are a bunch of questions that I want to get going. So I'm just going to start from the bottom here, and then we'll work our way up, because I think we answered some of them. So do you have any insight on how 6.1 or 6.21i FSS will be affected?
6.2, is that in the chat, or is this?
Yeah, 6.21i FS, something like that.
Let me look up what that is. I don't know off the top of my head.
I'd be impressed if you did.
Oh, are you talking about the category? I'm guessing they're talking about the old SIN of the 6.21. Does that sound right for whoever asked the question? I don't think I can see the same chat.
We'll wait for
this is the VA work, I think, is what they're referring to, the VA schedule. I don't know if they're chatting with you about that. To be determined. I have seen on the, on the list of consolidation efforts, I've seen the word medical tools, medic prescriptions as part of this consolidation. I don't have a clear answer about how that's going to, whether it's going to roll into mass, if they're still going to treat it as a separate vehicle. But I imagine that there will be changes. The agencies had 60 days from the executive order to talk about their efforts to consolidate and how they saw that happening and recommendations. So I think we should have some more answers on that in the next 30 days or so.
Thank you. All right. So,
and I will try to find out if you have the contact info, you can always send it to me and I will. I will definitely do that.
Awesome. So we have a question here about SOUP 6. Any thoughts about SOUP 6? So Katie, this is something you and I were talking about. NASA SOUP 5 did over $13 billion in transactions last year. They have a different contract access fee schedule. They have a different procedure. So I know GSA was ordered to be the executive agent on that contract and evaluate whether or not they're going to take over it. What are you hearing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a high probability that they can take that over or consolidate it into some of these vehicles. And I will say, I still feel a lot of these potential changes are really depending on what happens with the FAR. GSA as a mass vehicle does not allow for cost plus contracts. Oasis Plus does. So that little difference and the foundation of the language and the solicitation and the FAR dictate some of these things. So it's not as easy as GSA just saying, let's roll it into mass. There's definitely some larger procurement changes that have to be updated before that can happen. And I don't think we will necessarily know what the future of that is until the FAR is updated, because even if it would just be a different scope, or, I guess, foundation of a contract to just move it into mass. Could they keep it separate and have GSA administer it? That could be potentially an option. I don't know why they would necessarily want to do that. But the vehicle also did allow for commercial products and commodities. And, the executive order is pushing to, I think, really remove commercial commodities from schedules and to the commercial market. When, the GSA released this last batch of SINs that they're removing, tires, for example, shampoo, these are really simple commodities someone could purchase with a credit card. They don't need to be managed on the multiple award schedule. It's actually just like an additional layer of administration. So as they move commercial commodities to the commercial marketplace and away from contracting vehicles, how does that leave soup? And soup in certain categories, it was commodities and services. So the scope of that could change. I'd say be patient and watch the FAR and make your voice heard in the FAR. Look at the clauses that are incorporated into soup. Why are they different than the ones that are on mass? What are the differences? And I think we'll have a better idea of the future of these vehicles after that time. I can't imagine they can even do it before then. Mm-hmm.
A lot of thought needs to go into that for sure.
Yeah, it's not simple. It's not,
Nothing ever is. How do you think, I'm assuming they means GSA, how do you think GSA will deal with tariff price impacts?
So I've had multiple companies reach out to me about that. You have to work right now. You have to work within the EPA mechanisms that are awarded against your contract. So you justify the increase. You need to have evidence, whether it's new invoices or it's invoices from your suppliers, invoices that you're receiving upon import, that you can submit to the contracting team. Work with your contracting specialists at GSA, explain to them the situation you're in. Most of them are very understanding, and there are limitations on the amount that you can increase your GSA schedule, but we've certainly seen them make exceptions in the past. Of those limits. So talk to them, explain to them why, have as much evidence as you can, a paper trail that shows that you're not just, increasing your pricing. You want to show them that it's going to cost more and you're going to lose money if you don't do this. And most of them are going to work with you on it. I'm happy to answer any questions. I've gotten a few of them submitted and awarded already. And most, the people at GSA have been great to deal with. So.
Next question. Any insight on the impact of the GSA consolidation on agency-specific small business BPAs? BPAs competed on the mass schedule.
I think that agency-specific BPAs are going to be part of the review of what is consolidated. Why is there a BPA? What is the future of set-asides? We don't know. And again, I think this really goes back to what's going to, happen in the FAR. How much is SBA going to fight to keep our set-asides? Is there going to still remain a mandatory amount of set-aside business? The federal government's dictated to meet that. I've, certainly read some of the early information coming out of the administration, feeling like the federal government was meeting its goals and some of it wasn't necessary anymore. That's all publicly out there. How that is interpreted with the FAR to be determined, watch that. But I imagine removing the set-asides from the conversation, you can assume that the BPAs are going to be reviewed to understand what can be consolidated. And just because it's set aside now doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be in the future. And I think we'll have a better idea in the coming months about what the small business goals are. To what level are they going to be enforced, and what exists. So if the BPA is really only there as a way to help them meet their goals, I don't know, then you have to see if those goals still exist. And if the work that you're performing under that BPA is similar to work that's being performed under other contracts, is there a reason that they should keep that separate from rolling it up into a different contract?
All right. So suggestion here, I'd like to see categories of items to add versus specific items. For instance, we sell cybersecurity training. I have to justify each and every course. Couldn't we agree to a percentage discount of XYZ training courses so we can add all of them instead of one at a time? Course change, prices change, old courses are removed, new ones are added. How can I show past sales on brand new course that was just released? The maintenance is not good for us or GSA.
I agree 100%, which is why I believe pricing should be removed if GSA could ever get to an unpriced vehicle. But the foundation of the GSA schedule, you have to remember, of the multiple award schedule, that the reason it exists is because it was for commercial commodities and commercial products and services. So the reason that you originally were able to even get a schedule is because you sold this to someone in the commercial market. It's considered a commercial product or service, and that's how they justified the vehicle in a whole. So everything under the schedule is considered a commercial product or service. I know what you're saying. You have a new idea and you want to sell it, but the schedule was made for commercial things, proving that you had invoices previously. TDR might give you some flexibility if you can opt into TDR, but I will tell you, in the past couple of months, even if you're TDR, they are still asking us for invoices to support pricing, because they still have to determine if they're in reasonable pricing. And if there's not a lot of competition or data, they're going to ask you for the invoices, which is why I think it's really important that people communicate this to GSA and say that, and explain that this process would be way more efficient if, in a perfect world, I think if it was an unpriced vehicle and allowing you to sell what you wanted to at the order level, or creating more flexibility about what you can add to the schedule, knowing that you're going to discount it the best that you possibly can in order to win the work. So creating language in the solicitation to allow for that, I think, will make everyone more successful and have less of administrative burden. But there's some foundation language that really has to change before that can happen.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So a couple more questions. So if we run over, guys, we're just going to continue. The recording and the PowerPoint that's going to be available as soon as we get done here, we'll send it out to everybody. So last question in the Q&A, and then we have some in the chat. I heard Trump is going to cancel the Oasis contract. What is your thoughts on that?
I think there's a lot of crossover between Oasis Plus and Mass in the scope of what is in both. But right now, the Mass contract does not allow for cost plus, and Oasis does. That to me is like a foundational, simple difference. There's a lot of other things you can argue are very similar, but the way that agencies can award pricing is different. So that, in my opinion, has to change first. The way that they're priced, the way that these vehicles, the reason and the background. I do think the administration's goal is to cancel anything that's redundant. And I can understand that. I mean, just the amount of time that the industry spends responding to these solicitations, the amount of time the government spends reviewing it. If there's crossover, it makes sense. Do we need this many different vehicles? Why? What are the reasons? And again, have a voice in it. If you feel that there's a reason Oasis should survive and not GSA, speak loudly and get your opinion out there. I think the benefit of Mass versus Oasis pools, there's a lot of awardees, and obviously under certain categories of GSA Mass there are as well, but there's definitely SINs that fall under GSA Mass that are not, that they don't have hundreds of companies award it. So you can help shape your potential work in competition by looking at those SINs and understanding there's certain SINs that only have 30 companies, 60 companies. Well, certain Oasis pools are going to have thousands. I don't think they're even finished making all of the awards. So, and if they on ramp again, there's going to be a lot of competition. So, could it be canceled? Sure. Or could it be rolled somehow, consolidated it to manage it from a different administrative perspective? Absolutely. I think anything's on the table right now, and there's a possibility if there's overlap in the scope.
So next question is, GovWin sent out an email about cutting 20 billion in consulting contracts. We did a webinar on that last week. What is your outlook on that? Should we add those SIN numbers to our GSA schedule? We currently only have 541611.
GSA is coming down publicly pretty hard on the top 10 consulting firms that provide professional services and consulting. And, they look to those companies to give them a report to explain what are all of these contracts that you have, where is there overlap, is it necessary? And GSA wasn't really happy with what they came back with, and pushed back on them to give a more, detailed report. Where can you cut? And, right now that is right or wrong. The message is, where can you cut? And I think sometimes these, certain consulting professional services category have a bad rap. I mean, if you put yourself into the mind of Doge, it's where can we save money? What is extra that we're buying? Why are we buying this, and is it necessary? They're going to cut and then cut and cut until someone says, no, we need this back, and then add it back. I truly believe that's the philosophy, is to cut things that are not, really necessary, mission critical, or merit based, is a term that's being often used. So look, when you're thinking about the NAICS codes that, GovWin's saying are being cut, it is happening. I mean, it's in some cases they are, I don't know, doing it based on NAICS codes when they're evaluating this. But think about the services that you provide, and if it's really something that the government needs to complete some objective, anything that's considered, I don't want to say fluff, but if you're someone who doesn't know much about government contracting and you look at your scope of work, would you say, yes, the government needs this to survive, or this is something nice that the government has, and let's get rid of it and see how bad we really need it? And, I think we all can do you can look at the executive orders, you can see the future of what's happening. Automation is the future, using technology. And if you're providing professional services in those categories, understand if you really feel that that's something that someone that knows nothing about the government reads your statement of work and decides whether or not it's needed. So
last question here is,
Mm-hmm.
How does this impact agencies that traditionally don't use GSA or follow the FAR, like the FAA, for example?
I don't know what the FAA, if they're rolling in, I'm not sure what I don't know where they fall on that list of the agencies that are rolling acquisition in. I don't know. I don't know I think the FAA does use mass, though. I think they do make purchases. I mean, they have their own vehicles. EFAST, I believe, is the FAA, one of their vehicles.
I think SAVES is another one.
Yeah. I think they're all up for review. I mean, I think any vehicle that's out there, even if it's not under the FAR, I would say any ways to consolidate procurement, that's going to happen. So,
well, one more that just came in. What is the typical time frame to get a mass schedule from start to finish?
Right now, we're seeing them moving really quick. They're fast, 90 to 120 days for review. I can't say that that's going to happen in the future. GSA has until tomorrow and to do their voluntary, leave, voluntary retirement, and then after there's an expected reduction in force. So I would say I always tell people 6 to 12 months to be safe. It's generally faster, but that's the worst case scenario. But right now they're moving pretty fast. So, just talk to us and we'll will help you figure it out. And it's going to be about who it gets assigned to and how quickly they're moving and what their workload is. But IT generally moves the fastest. And, some of those have been 30 to 60 days.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for coming on and spending time with us, sharing your expertise. Sure. I learned a bunch of stuff today, so I appreciate that. I hope all of you guys did out in who have attended the webinar. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, and we'll go ahead and get those answered as soon as we can. And certainly any help you guys need, let us know. If you got somebody asked about an IRS webinar with opportunities and stuff. So we'll take a look at that and see if there's anything else. But if you guys are interested in any other deep dives into a specific agency, please let us know, and we'll be happy to take a look at those and see what kind of value we can bring there. So thanks again, everybody. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I hope you had a great Easter holiday. Happy Tuesday, and enjoy the nice weather if you're around DC, because it's gorgeous today. So appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.
See ya.